convention. And now please welcome Dina Martinez, IYD National Committee Representative, to introduce Josh Owens, our first speaker.
Good morning, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. This convention is really special because I get to introduce one of my heroes. Our next guest is someone I look up to very much. When I think of an inspirational and aspirational young Dem, Josh Owens is the first name that comes to mind. Josh is an entrepreneur, educator, and community activist. As CEO of Supply Kick, he put Hoosiers first, with a minimum $500,000 salary for all team members as his company grew rapidly. As a Democratic candidate for Indiana governor and Indiana's first LGBTQ+ candidate for a statewide elected office, he developed the leading plan to increase pay for all Hoosier teachers, fought for universal background checks, criminal justice reform, cannabis legislation, and climate justice. Josh is a founding member of Vote Safe Indiana, working to expand vote by mail for all Hoosiers, and the Orr Fellowship, working to keep college graduates in our state. Josh is a prime example of what many young Dems aspire to be. Join me in welcoming the man himself, Josh Owens.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me today, and I really appreciate that introduction. Thanks for taking your Saturday to join in solidarity and learning and in action with young Dems from all around our state. You know, 2020 is the year that change is coming to America. It's the year Indiana elects a congressperson like Christina Hale in the 5th District. It's the year Joe Biden will triumph over Donald Trump. And here in Indiana, if we are to end 16 years of Republican policies in the supermajority and in the same old ways of doing things, it will be because each of you are helping elect Democratic candidates with the courage and the heart to lead. That's why it's so great to be with all of you this morning, even if we can't be in the same room together and have to join together on Zoom. I know Ariel, James, Chris, and the entire IYD leadership team have an amazing day lined up for you. I'm thrilled to be a small part of your morning. And I'm excited to talk with each of you because I join you in a mutual mission. I desperately want young leadership in Indiana. I want young voices to be amplified. I want young voices to be driving us to be better, calling out for a more just and equitable Indiana. I want young voices leading us into a new decade, joined together in action to solve problems and deliver a future worthy of every single Hoosier. Indiana is lucky to already have several young Democrats in office across our state, in the state Senate and the state House of Representatives, and in our city councils from Gary to Evansville and in between. And some of your fellow attendees today are already on the path to Democratic wins this November. Today, we celebrate these trailblazers and we're excited to hear from them. But we need more. I'm here to recruit you. You see, I want you, the young leaders at this convention, to run the Democratic campaigns that will flip seats from red to blue all across Indiana. And I want you to run for office, just like I did. A year ago, I began the journey of running for governor here in Indiana. I didn't have electoral experience, but I had taught thousands of students at Butler University and IU. I had led one of Indiana's fastest growing companies with a record of leadership paying every team member at least $50,000 a year. And I personally knew what it was like to grow up gay in Indiana with someone like Mike Pence as governor passing policies that defined my existence. Over 7 months, I traveled across the state, talking with tens of thousands of Hoosiers, convinced that we could accomplish so much more than what we have settled for here in Indiana. And settled is the word I kept using, that I kept coming back to. You see, when we settle, we accept things as they are, resigned to a future that is easy but unremarkable and no better than today. But there are so many more things that we could be doing to deliver a better tomorrow for people in our state and in our nation. And you all already know what matters and what we should be focused on. Black lives matter, Black trans lives matter, and policies that end racism matter in our state. Not being fired for being queer matters. protecting dreamers matters. Equal, fast, and safe access to voting for every single Hoosier matters. Here in Indiana, fully funding public schools, ending gun violence, protecting reproductive rights, ending cash bail, increasing minimum wages, and lowering family health care costs, and so much more matter and will define us in our fight. The pace of this change matters too, though. In the last few weeks, in support of incremental policy changes to address police violence aimed at Black Americans and the militarization of our police forces, I've seen so many uses of phrases like "this long road" and "this is one small step." Those phrases make me want to scream. Yes, I'm impatient, but it is this lack of urgency I see on so many issues that brought me into politics in the first place. And I know for many of you, this lack of urgency drives you too. Our best effort against this lack of urgency is to bring to office young, dynamic leaders who look like, sound like, and live lives like all of us. Young leaders who are willing to jump into the fight and loudly advocate for policies that boldly solve problems. You see, when I was out on the campaign trail, I confirmed something that you need to know. Hoosiers are yearning for leadership. They desperately want candidates out there who can speak their language, have lived their lives, and that fight for a future that is bigger than they can see even themselves. They want hope. Running for office is not easy. You may not be the preferred candidate. You may not have the highest name recognition. And if you're young, your resume may not be as long as some of the others in the race. But you can bring something that others can't. The hope of a bold, even radically better future for everyone. Because it is always in our next generation that we see the best version of ourselves. If you do run for office soon, know that you must outwork your competition. But do so with the knowledge that your voice is not just valid, it is needed. Your experiences in life are exactly what should inform the policies and laws that drive our communities forward. In the next 4 years, there are 1,000 school board races across Indiana, each setting policies for teacher pay, equitable investment, and school safety. In the next 4 years, there are hundreds of city council, mayor, and county races across Indiana, setting policies on police use of force, housing investment, and access to guns. In the next 4 years, every single House and Senate seat is up in the Indiana legislature. And while many of those are held by our friends, so many additional seats can be flipped with a candidate like you who puts justice and equality at the top of the to-do list. I don't know who at this convention today needs to hear it, but I'm saying it to you directly and with every ounce of confidence I have. You are qualified to run, you are ready to lead, and you are needed to change our state. You are not the next generation, your time is now. You are the Democrats who will win, and you are the ones that will get it done in Indiana. Today, you're going to hear from some incredibly inspiring Hoosiers. People like Congressman Andre Carson and Congressman Pete Visclosky. You're going to hear from people who need your help to win in Indiana. People like Christina Hale, who has the heart to solve problems for all Hoosiers and can flip the 5th District blue this year. People like Dr. Woody Myers and Linda Lawson, who can lead our state inclusively and with courage, and Jonathan Weinzapfel, who can finally bring integrity to the Attorney General's office. But before we get to these Hoosiers and your breakout training sessions today, I'm honored to introduce your keynote speaker. And to be honest, I'm not sure how to introduce the most famous young Hoosier there is. What I can simply say is that as I traveled across the state this last year as the first openly LGBTQ candidate for statewide office in Indiana, the reception, support, and enthusiasm for my candidacy was in no small part due to the historic efforts of Pete Buttigieg. Pete Buttigieg is the former 2-term mayor of South Bend, Indiana, and was a Democratic candidate for president of the United States in 2020. He's a graduate of Harvard University and an Oxford Rhodes Scholar. Mayor Pete enlisted in the US Navy Reserve and became a lieutenant when he was deployed to Afghanistan in 2014. And last year, in April 2019, he announced his candidacy for president, and in February 2020, he won the Iowa caucuses, becoming the first openly gay person to ever win a presidential primary or caucus. It's not lost on me that Pete joins us this week on yet another week where the rights of us LGBTQ Americans were decided by the Supreme Court. 5 times in the last 20 years, our rights were expanded not by legislative action, but by the court. That Pete took our fight to the race for president of the United States, among so many other Democratic priorities, is testament to the courage and strength young Democrats bring to each and every race. Mayor Pete is and will forever be a favorite son of the Hoosier State. So before we hear from Pete, watch this historic moment for our state from his campaign in this video clip here. Take a look.
It's good to be home. This campaign was built on an idea of hope, an idea of inclusion. We went out there with that one shot, and we gave it everything we had, because it is time for every single person in this country to look to the White House and know that that institution stands for them, that they belong in this country. It's an honor to come home and to bring home the person I love so dearly. So please help me welcome to the stage my dear husband, the man I love so much, Mayor Pete Buttigieg. It's so good to be in South. Here we are. In the last few years, America has faced enormous challenges. And so, like so many others, I thought deeply about what I could do to make a difference, what I could do to make myself useful. And it was in that spirit, with your help, that a year ago, we launched our campaign for the American presidency. Hardly anybody knew my name, and even fewer could pronounce it. But South Bend showed everybody what to do. First name Mayor, last name Pete, so nobody. By every conventional wisdom,
We were able to see a little bit of that video there, but here coming up is Pete Buttigieg.
Hi, it's Pete Buttigieg, and I'm so thankful for the chance to join you virtually but enthusiastically as we come together for the Indiana Young Democrats Convention and commit ourselves to support one another in the unbelievably, historically important work of making sure that we elect Democrats up and down the ticket. As you know, I'm fresh off the experience of running for president and doing it as the youngest candidate in the field and the youngest candidate in quite some time to step forward. One of the things that I saw, not just in my own campaign, but in all of the conversations that we had with voters, with activists and advocates, with elected officials, with fellow Democrats and people that were calling over to our side, is that the longer you're planning to be here, the younger you are, the more you have at stake in a set of decisions that is about to be made that will reverberate through American history and certainly set the terms of what it will be like to live in America for the rest of our lives. I don't think it's a coincidence that so many of the most important actions and movements and steps that we've seen in recent years and in recent weeks have been largely led by young people. And we have to make sure that Indiana not only hears the call, but leads the way, as I believe we're capable of. I'm sick of people knowing Indiana principally based on the vice president. We can do better, and you have been doing better by coming together to make sure that we elect great Democrats up and down the ticket. So no matter who you supported in this year's presidential primary, I want to thank you for your involvement. And I want to urge you to find new ways to take that advocacy forward. You know, the reality is the job of a candidate in this moment of the pandemic has changed, but it's only changed so much. They are still doing the work of speaking to issues, engaging with voters, raising resources, contacting the media. It's actually the rest of us, those who are supporting those candidates, who will have the most work to do in finding new ways in this moment to respond, to campaign, and to effectively support the people that we believe in. And if that already seemed critically important before, we now know that much more why it's indispensable. Our country is in a state of anguish over the police violence that has killed so many Black Americans, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, those killed not by police, but certainly in the context of systemic racism, like Ahmaud Arbery, and so many others. We can no longer allow this to be viewed as an issue that will burden only those Black activists and leaders of color who have been crying out about this for a lifetime. Of course, Black voices are and should be leading the way. But this is a time for white Americans, white Hoosiers, white progressives to recognize our own role as allies, to step up, educate ourselves, do a better job of supporting those who are standing for their own rights and for their own lives. I've been thinking a lot about the nature of allyship because of the extraordinary news that has come down from the Supreme Court. We knew that the Civil Rights Act protected LGBTQ Americans on a common sense reading, but that was not officially the law of the land. When the sun came up on Monday morning, it remained the case that in so many parts of America, in so many parts of Indiana, it was perfectly legal to fire somebody because of who they are or who they love. That change, that extraordinary decision by the Supreme Court, followed the leadership of so many activists and advocates, including the extraordinary leadership of Black trans women and other activists 50 years ago, at a time when pride, as we now know it, had its roots largely in a response to police violence. The work of those activists and the work of straight allies made it possible for us to enjoy the enormous steps forward in LGBTQ equality that we have seen, even though we know that there's a long way to go. And so I think it's a time for anybody who is on the benefiting side of any kind of privilege, including the racial privilege that white people enjoy, to face what that means and recognize the obligation to step up and deliver the change that we all know needs to happen across the country. Meanwhile, our country has been brought to a near standstill by a pandemic that reminds us, like climate change, of just how much matters in making sure that our leaders respect science, let politics take a backseat to saving lives, understand the inequities and disparate impacts of these colossal challenges that come our way, and are ready to actually call us to do what is needed to get through a crisis together. Obviously, we don't have that, but we could, and we will, thanks to the work that you're doing. I've heard a lot of activists and advocates talk about the fact that this isn't just a matter of getting the right candidates and the right elected officials in. It's not just about voting. And that's correct. I agree. At the same time, we know that these changes won't happen unless we do get out and vote, protect the vote, support those candidates whose values around justice, around a progressive vision of what freedom and what democracy and what security mean. If they're sure those candidates are elected to office. As President Obama said recently, at the end of the day, this is about making sure that specific practices and institutions change. democracy, our moment of greatest empowerment to make sure that that happens is Election Day. Of course, I know that I'm preaching to the choir, speaking to the young Democrats about this issue. But I want to urge you to stay strong in your outreach to others who, for very understandable reasons, have come to question whether the institutions and the political system of our country are capable of delivering real change. They are capable, but only if we insist that they are. And that's the work that you're doing and that all of us are doing in order to make sure that we have unity and inclusion driving greater equality and the right kinds of outcomes with the right kinds of leaders in this country. So much depends on this upcoming November. It won't solve all of our problems, but it will radically change our ability to face them. And I think it's also time to send a message around the country that there is no such thing as a permanently red district or community or state. We could send such a powerful message by getting more Democrats elected here in the state of Indiana, again, up and down the ticket. And when we do, people will take note. I've seen it happen. I've seen how even people who used to think of themselves as Republicans recognize that they can no longer be on board with the cruelty, with the division, even the hatred that emanates from and is condoned by this White House. This is a once-in-a-generation opportunity for us to realign American politics, to make sure that our values, progressive values, which are also deeply American values, carry the day and win the era. That's why I've always believed that elections are not just about winning an office, but winning an era to come. I believe that the 2020s are going to be remembered for setting the tone for what the years and decades that we will live the rest of our lives in are going to be like. And all of that begins with this 2020 election. I guess what I'm saying is for the younger generations involved in politics today, there is tremendous pressure and a tremendous burden, but also an unbelievable opportunity to decisively shape American life for the years and decades to come. And I hope you never underestimate the moral authority that you have as young Americans, as young Hoosiers, looking in the eye elected officials demanding that they do a better job of providing for greater racial and economic justice and equality, of ensuring that the climate is one that you and the generations to follow can actually thrive in, for protecting you and your neighborhoods and your schools and your communities from gun violence on issue after issue after issue. The mere fact of looking into the eyes of a young voter or a young person not even yet old enough to vote can change perspectives. I saw it happen when we succeeded in counties in Iowa that reminded me of Indiana that had voted for Barack Obama and then voted for Donald Trump and now were ready to move in the right direction. And the advocacy and the activism that, but most of all the vocabulary, the sensibility that you have because you were in the trenches in a so-called red state, fighting not only for your friends and your allies, but for your lives in so many ways. That's what's going to bring about real change. It's the only thing that ever has. And I support you every step of the way. I want to thank you for what you're doing, especially when you come from a community where it can be tough sledding to be a Democrat. There are so many more of us than is known. And as we stand together and make our voice heard, protect the vote and turn out the vote, we're going to have a lot of reason to celebrate in November. And then we're going to have a huge amount of work to do. Because all of the debating that played out in the primaries over exactly how to meet these goals, how to deliver racial justice, how to fundamentally change the culture of policing in this country, how to make sure that we meet those urgent deadlines around our climate that are being set not by politicians, but by science, how we raise wages and empower workers in this country, how we support public education. We're going to have those debates again over how exactly to get that right. But the questions that are being settled in November aren't about how to do those things. They're about whether to do those things. It's about whether this country will be pulled together or pulled apart. It's about whether climate change must be acted on or whether we'll continue to pretend that it's a hoax. It's about whether racial and economic justice will actually be taken seriously in this country, whether this country will do anything meaningful to demonstrate that Black lives matter and are valued equally across the land. Those are the questions that are about to be settled in this upcoming election. And we have a chance to make sure that they are answered in a way that we'll be proud of when we are speaking to future generations about what it was like to be alive and involved at the dawn of the 2020s. That's the opportunity. That's why I'm proud to be standing with you. And that's why it's going to feel so good when we celebrate the fruits of all the hard work that you are doing and that you are about to be doing for all of the days between here and Election Day. I can't wait to visit with you and spend time with you in person again. But in the meantime, from here in South Bend, I'm sending you all of my warmest greetings, my strongest encouragement, and my deepest thanks. Take care, stay well, and stay involved.
Thank you, Mayor Pete, for your inspiring words. Many of us young Democrats were honored to volunteer for your campaign, including speaking with Iowa voters leading up to the caucus last January. The enthusiasm of your campaign has reinvigorated our party and given us hope for a bright future.